Welcome to the Tech Life podcast. In this episode, I was lucky enough to sit down with Mike Danoski, Principal Program Manager at Microsoft within the Intune team. We got talking about policies in Intune, what's changed and is still changing, calendar organising, and cutting out the noise to focus, along with how it's not just always a 9-to-5 world. I hope you enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe, turn on your notifications for upcoming episodes, and drop a like or comment. Mike.
Yeah.
Absolute pleasure to be able to grab some of your very valuable time. We're at MMS and it's a complete whirlwind at the minute.
It is.
Very, very busy time.
Yeah.
Do you want to just explain exactly who you are for people who might not be aware of you and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I'm a senior product manager, so we just switched from program manager to product manager this year. Very little impact other than just, some industry terminology change. I've been a product manager, I've been a PM, a senior PM for almost a little over 2 years. And my background from there was in support. So for the 5 years before that, I worked on the Intune team and the PG on a group that specifically takes escalations from the support teams, frontline support teams, through up escalation. There's like a 5% escalation rate that ends up getting to engineering. And then from there, it's about a 50-50 on whether it needs dev versus just a little bit of extra care and feeding.
So that's interesting then. So you've actually come from the trenches, as we like to usually call it. So you're not just sat up in an ivory tower thinking of new fantastic products and stuff. You can actually relate to how that transgresses down to the unwashed masters, the people trying to use it, and actually how it then drives the effect of the product going onwards.
Yeah, because when I started, so it's actually, I got a really good insight early on. I was a college hire. My background's in mechanical engineering and aerospace stuff. And so those projects take a really long time. And then I joined into Microsoft, and they sort of skilled us all up. We had 100 days of training. Me and my they call them the mock Microsoft Academy of College Hires. And there were about 90 of us that were slotted to go into support. And so they trained us up. And I think originally I was slotted to take on Active Directory. So proper, hey, here's your first, your domain controller, here's a domain controller, DC promo up, DC promo down, here's a GPO. And probably we had maybe 20 days of training left, and our new manager came down and said, you know what, there's a new business need, you're all going to support Windows 8.0, which just hit RTM. So that was very much like a scramble of like, okay, what is this thing? Let's go figure it out. Like we'd all kind of been skilled for Windows, but that was very much a change. And so Windows 8.0 notoriously had some issues at launch and things like that, right? Not issues, big changes, right? And I think that sort of, you kind of see this separation, like you said, between the folks who build the product and what customers want. And I think I'm really fortunate for when I joined in 2012, because at the time it was the Steve Ballmer days and sort of the traditional way of doing things, and I got to see the transition to Satya and see the culture change and see everything that took place. And I think Intune in general and MEM all up, including ConfigMan, does a really great job of listening to customers. And it was cool to be a part of that culture that sort of like, there's a couple seeds throughout Microsoft that you can really point back to and say like, look, this is where a lot of this started. And I believe Endpoint Manager is one of those, right? Yeah. We have a team, we have multiple teams that are in the product group, but they just focus on customer stuff. The customer acceleration team, Fast Track, all these teams, they all kind of spawned at the same time. So yeah.
It's an interesting one, that, because I don't think a lot of people, especially outside of this conference, because this conference does a really good job at highlighting it, don't realise just what effort goes on behind the scenes, specifically in the MEM side of listening to customer feedback. We've had a few sessions where we keep highlighting the whole smiley faces in the config manager
send
console.
Send a smile, send a found, yeah.
Twitter.
Oh yeah.
That's such a valuable data source, I believe, for you guys.
Yeah.
Just general communications with people.
Absolutely.
Just the fact is as well that there could be that misgiven of saying, well, yeah, it's all very well and good saying, yes, we do listen and all the rest of it. But we actually start to see a lot of the changes within the product sets that do come from customer feedback.
Totally.
Is there anything that you could give advice-wise in terms of people that either don't feel like it's valuable for them to give feedback, so they might be holding back rather than just mentioning things?
I mean, for me, there's two different types of feedback that we get in the product team, and some of it's numbers, and some of it's a story. And the more you can paint a story with what you want, like it's one thing to say, this button needs to do this, and it's another thing to say, I'm a company, our business goals are this. If this ever happens, we can't do business.
Right.
And this happened last year, or this happened last week, or it's happening now. And the story helps us understand more about the problem. Because while, we do get a ton of requests of like, we need this button to do this, we need this here, we need this here. And certainly there's like fit and finish, like search, sort, filter everywhere. Like, yeah, we need to go do that. But then there's things that it helps to have that story, because as a PM team, we can go and dig into that and try and dig into the root of the issue, and maybe we can come up with some other ways to fix it that's sort of more aligned with some other stuff that we're doing. And so telling the story and really highlighting the problem rather than just like thinking about the solution you want to go for.
Actually discuss proper impact rather than just we would like.
Yeah.
Now, you did just happen to mention filters there. I'll come on to that. But going back to what you were just saying around that whole when Windows 8 was introduced and stuff, and it was a big change in the interface, ways of working, but then there was that whole consistency bit as we saw the legacy bleeding through into the new side of it. Obviously, as we get to see more and more of Intune coming through, or MEM Admin Console, whatever you want to call it these days, there's obviously a product that was there and it came about and things have improved over time. We're seeing new settings and stuff, or new features coming into it all the time. In terms of, and we've seen lots of blog posts recently around things like the endpoint security policies and stuff, getting the filtering and stuff, what sort of activities are you doing around that side, and why? Why do you care whether there's a filter on one thing or not? So
for me, when I started, I came right in at the beginning of the project that we're sort of rebuilding all of settings from the ground up. We've built everything iteratively over time and sort of like migrated when we need to, and it's like migrating meaning like we went from the Silverlight console to the Azure portal and things like that, and sort of lift and shift and migrate all the policies. And I was there for those from the support side, so I got to learn like, when we do it this way, we accidentally remove this profile type thing, and all the incidents and things like that. But I think for me, the project I'm working on now for settings is sort of making everything universal, and I'm seeing that sort of everywhere. So like filters is what we call a horizontal, so it's not like a vertical, like this is apps, this is settings, this is what have you, enrollment. And so it has to cross all the different boundaries, and what that usually means is each team needs to then go and implement that horizontal, and that's been a priority for our product team, to make sure that when we launch anything new that it satisfies all the existing horizontals. And doing things in a data-driven way, and in like sort of this data-driven is kind of a loaded term, but like automated way, right? So instead of us going and doing research like, there's a new setting available for Windows, this is what it does, let's go build the UX for it, and more so getting at building them off of, like, we've added 11,000 settings in the past year or so, which is crazy. Now, 4,700 of them are for Office, but we were able to do that in like a month, where that would have taken forever before.
Okay, so from my limited understanding, and there's probably too much for this at the minute, that's where you're taking what's out there and existing with the CSPs within Windows and stuff, the other things are exposed, and actually starting to look at properly programmatically ingesting them rather than somebody sat there ticking off things that they've typed into on the console, I presume.
And then when everything's programmatically added, we add something like support for something like filters or policy sets or things like that, or like deep policy search. The more standardized all of our pieces are, the easier it is for us to implement those, maintain them, because once we go and replumb things like the endpoint security policies over to this new backend, since it's already there for settings catalog, when we made that investment up front, it shows up there. And when we go do it for baselines, it's going to be the same. When we go do it for device config, it'll be the same. And it's cross-platform, and it's it's good.
It's good, but on that flip side as well, like you say, there was a staggering number of different new policies and stuff that are coming through, albeit automated and great. But for the day-to-day admin, that's a lot of incoming new things to be aware of, go see, and Intune moves at such a rapid pace. even I live and breathe consuming information, find it hard to keep up. Now, I have my ways that I make that easier for myself, and the team generally end up either drawing on me or finding their own ways. How do you keep up? Maybe not specifically, you have a bit more probably of a lead time within the Intune world of stuff coming, but generally tech as it's coming through, new ideas. How do you learn?
And I think the key thing there as well is when we saw the transition, one of the things that Satya talks about all the time is being a learn-it-all in growth hacking. And that's all about, like, if you're a know-it-all, that's great, but you'll be out of date like in a month. So being a learn-it-all and figuring out what you need to go learn, and then also being confident that you can go learn it if you need to, or unlearn it if you need to. So coming from support, you have to know, like when you pick up the phone for Intune support, you could get, hey, my Apple Business Manager token is expired and I need to help renew it. Or I have 50,000 Windows devices that won't go through autopilot. Or I've got an Android device, kiosk device that I can't install this app on. So you've got to be sort of everywhere. And so you have to learn how to learn quickly and learn enough to be confident. And a lot of the times, it's getting the basic fundamentals down of sort of the blocks, the building blocks of like how a service works, or like the major concepts of like, okay, I understand in group policy, like say you're coming from group policy and you want to learn MDM, it's generally the same concepts.
Yeah.
Something gets in, like an intent gets created somewhere, and then it eventually has to flow down into a service on Windows and then spread out, and the feature picks it up.
Yeah.
Generally the same, but if you need to go troubleshoot it, then you need to understand all those different pieces. And as they change, if you sort of have that fundamental, you sort of can, I think there's a lot of very intuitive people who work in IT who can sort of look at a system and go, okay, and being comfortable sort of making assumptions, but then going and verifying. I think for me, that's helped me sort of learn. And then the other side of that is I've got a dev team behind me, and I think there was probably a time in support where I prided myself in being like super technically deep. And at the time, my manager was like, "You're not technically deep enough." Yeah. And now as a PM, they're like, "You're too technically deep." But people will. It's inevitable. People will rise up around you who are more technical than you in other areas, and the knee-jerk reaction might be to panic and be like, "I need to go learn more than these people. Oh, I'm falling behind in this area." And if you've got a team of like 10 people and they're all rock stars, you're not going to compare to the team of 10 people. Like, understand your own strengths and what you can contribute to the team, and don't worry about trying to be better than other people. Because I think that's sort of the initial thing, and then you can fall back. They're your team. Like, fall back on them when you need it.
Yeah, that is a really good point. It's not that whole trying to compete side of it, because you can only do so much at one time on a certain field. So if you're dragging your attention over there to try and compete with someone, you're not doing something else they might potentially need to be doing.
Yeah.
Plus, then you're just in that cat and mouse game because they learn all the rest of it. But like you say, they are also teammates, other people, and generally it's great to share the knowledge and the workload and just learn from them and use them as an encyclopedia. Absolutely. They can then go and draw on your strengths. Yep. Yeah, no, I get that a lot.
And getting narrow can help as well, because I know it can be stressful to try and figure out everything and be aware of everything and on top of everything. And there are some people who I know who I'm like, oh, this person's on top of everything. But I'm sure if you ask them, they're like, oh, you know what, I'm really rusty in this area. I haven't thought about this in a while. So for me, career-wise, it's been nice to get a little bit narrower. Like focus on Windows, focus on policy. At some point, maybe get a little more broad, understand, refocus, things like that. And I heard an analogy once where as new hires, we got a lot of like sort of not career training, but sort of like, hey, here's how you kind of need to think about these kinds of things. And one of them was, the analogy was like, think of an oxyacetylene welding torch where you've got oxygen and acetylene, 2 tanks, you spark it, and at first the flame's out of control. It's bright red, orange, blowing fire everywhere. And your goal, if you want to weld through something or cut a hole in something, is you've got get that mixture just right. You play with it until you get just a fine point, and right when it breaks through, then you're ready to go. So sometimes finding that right focus, like it could take a while depending on the
Yeah.
person, and everyone's different, but once you find that right focus and find what you're good at, that's where you have that breakthrough. And be looking for those breakthroughs, right? You have to be retrospective or introspective, because you might be there and not know it and not give yourself that credit.
That makes perfect sense. So on that same sort of learning side of it, obviously we get, especially within IT, absolute torrents of information thrown at us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We're constantly trying to work out how we digest that, and we have obviously busy work lives as well. So there's kind of a twofold question coming in. So obviously we should have a set job time, hours, days, whatever. And a lot of people will look at people that don't work within IT and just kind of go, why don't you just work 9 to 5?
Yeah.
Is it a case of either within yours or your beliefs that we should be working a straight 9 to 5 within tech, or is that a complete fallacy when it comes to tech, but is there still a cut-off point? And do you do anything to manage that kind of switch from work into personal?
Yeah, in the past few years it's been tough, right?
Yeah.
Because you're at home, you're sitting there, it's like, when do you roll off, roll away from the computer, and then your phone's still going, and you're like, then you're like, I'm going to go eat, and then I'm going to come back because I got a meeting in an hour, and then I'm going to go try and do this. Oh, something else popped up. Yeah, it's not easy. And I think a lot of people are unfair to themselves. I think a lot of people could probably relate to that feeling of like, I'm not doing enough. I feel like I need to do more. I feel like I'm not doing enough. And I think for me personally, that's still a challenge. And it changes over time too, right? Like I have a 6-year-old son, and that my work-life balance is very different than it was 7 years ago. But then also, there's different things I want to do when I get off work, so that maybe helps me say like, okay, I'm going to be done. I'm going to go do this because I have different priorities now. But really, I think the 9 to 5 works for some people if that's everything that's in there. But like if you have stuff that's outside of those hours, and if you have that feeling of like I'm not doing enough, it's okay if within that time you're going and doing other things, because I work best in the afternoon. I've found that between 4 and 8 is like my prime time. Unfortunately, that's also like dinner time and bedtime is squished in there. But I find like that's the time when I get in those states where you're like, all right, I'm gonna sit down and get all this work done, and then you look up and it's 4 hours later. You're like, I got so much done. That was great. But hey, yeah. So managing that kind of thing, and I think the 9 to 5 today is really tough to work too, because I'll break my hours and wake up early to go meet with someone who's in the European time zone, and I gotta pop on at 7, and that's okay. But maybe I'll start the rest of my day a little later, or go for a walk during lunch or something. But it's kind of hard to do that sometimes.
In terms of just scheduling between either meetings or tasks that you have to get accomplished, what works best for you in terms of organising yourself? Are you a direct calendar man? Are you a list man? Or do you have some other fancy way of trying to organise your thoughts and your deliverables?
I've been using Viva, the new Microsoft.
Okay.
And that, I clicked a button at one point that said schedule focus time for me, and that has been huge. It's been massive, because otherwise I'll just get 30-minute meetings popped here and there, and while it's not a long time and it's usually quick, it breaks context. And so getting those focus gaps in has been super crucial, and using Viva to do that has been really nice, because it just automatically puts you on there. I'm very calendar driven. Right. I'll also do some listing and using To-Do and using mostly OneNote for that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm very calendar driven. And then the other thing that I started doing recently, actually like 2 weeks ago, was I reorganized all my mailbox rules, which was a terrible day. But once it's done, what my goal was minimizing the amount of mail that hits just my direct inbox. Right. Because that's what shows up on my phone. Yeah. So I went through my rules of my inbox should only be the stuff that's high priority and urgent enough that if it was on my phone, I would take action. Okay. So, because I use my phone all the time. I've got Outlook on there, and I've got conditional access set up, and we're rocking and rolling there. So there's actually, I just thought of another tip that works really well for me, but for that. And then I have a read later folder that's just, the next one down, and that's the majority of my meeting notes and requests. And I made a folder that just has my meeting cancellations, and not because like I needed to organize them in a separate way, but one of my new favorite things to do is to sit and click cancel meeting, cancel meeting, cancel meeting, cancel meeting. Even if they were like a week ago, just pop, 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 pop. Oh, it's very nice.
All the stuff I've avoided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead.
I like that. I do like that tip because I live and breathe on my phone if I'm wandering about and stuff. So I'm actually going to take that idea.
Oh, it's
I'm
really
going
nice.
to go and actually have a play with that because that could really help me personally.
Yeah.
So
make sure your chain of command is in there. Like your highly important people go straight in there. And then my other last tip is I'm calendar focused. And for me, when I visually look at my calendar, it gives me anxiety because I'm triple book, quadruple book, 5, 6, 7, 8 for certain half-hour slots. Just because, just who knows what's in there. We do days of learning and things like that. So there's all kinds of stuff in there. And so what I've developed is you can go into filters or view and then filters and then advanced. And I made a category called hide.
Okay.
And so it still shows up on Teams, which is nice because you can go look there, but I mostly use the Outlook calendar. And you still get the meeting reminders that pop up. Hey, this is in 5 minutes. But when I look at my calendar, I can visually see my busy chunks of the day and my open chunks of the day.
Yes.
And so then I can kind of think like, okay, I'm going to be here for the next 4 hours. Let me go, grab something to eat. Let me take care of this, or, get the little guy ready for school a little early today type thing.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're less worried then about what the actual task is that's in your calendar.
Yeah.
It's like, am I doing something or not doing something?
It's more frequency
I've got time
based.
to actually get stuff in there in the frame. That's actually a really good tip.
Recurring meetings get hidden, especially if it's like the type of thing that I might show up if there's an action item type thing.
Yeah.
Ship room gets hidden. I just know that's at 10. I don't need to see it every day. I know I need to be there. That kind of stuff. And so that way for me, like, because I was like, man, visually, I just can't tell what's going on today. I can't get a wrap on my day. Am I going to have free time? Like, what's going on? And now I'm like, okay, cool. And usually it tapers. It's like Monday is like this, and then Friday is like this. A lot in the morning, especially being West Coast US. It's a lot in the morning.
On that side.
Yeah.
So obviously, very busy calendar.
Yeah.
So when you are in either the zone of doing bits and pieces, or you have important meetings around some of the new bits that are coming through, what within the whole MEM world would you say is either a feature that people should absolutely be looking at now, or has important stuff that's coming through to be really aware of? And also, is there anything that is coming through, not asking for secret NDAs or anything here, or something that you know that is coming along the pipeline that people should really be starting to get excited about?
Well, I think there's a lot of stuff that's been there for a while that people are just starting to scratch the surface on. Autopilot's a big one, but I haven't talked to a single IT admin at this entire conference that isn't thinking about, well, there's a few people who are cloud native and they're not thinking about GPO to MDM, but GPO to MDM is big. Because what I see right now is, what I think I see, is the baseline people are saying, here's your baseline, but they're not, some of them are sort of MDM focused, a lot of them are still GP focused.
Yeah.
IT decision makers are saying, hey, move to MDM. Hey, it should be lift and shift, right? But there's a whole bucket of analysis that has to take place in order to rationalize, like, we don't need this Windows Vista widgets setting anymore. And I think a lot of people struggle with, what do I need to bring forward and what can I leave behind? If you're hybrid Azure AD, you can leave some of the GPO stuff there. And when you have an Azure AD only device, you'll just have the new stuff.
Totally agree with you on that.
But it's a huge project.
Exactly. Trying to get people to understand that just because you ticked a box 7 years ago, and it's just been left in place, does not mean that in the new world you have to leave it. It's that chance to actually start to, I'm not disagreeing, it is a big task, but to go through review and clean house.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, I think you talked about being the PM in the ivory tower, and I think in the ivory tower, I'm like, go talk to your security folks, get their list of requirements. And what I'm hearing here this week is like, security folks don't have a list of requirements. It's usually like, do this baseline plus these things, and then let's see what happens.
I've been on projects where we've literally said, right, what are the security team's requirements? To go,
Yeah.
that works, we want that.
Yeah.
No. What is your actual requirements? And yes, it's very difficult to get that from the security teams or even the actual admins that implement it in the first place.
Oh, yeah. And then making sure that you're giving them still the delegated tools and stuff. So filters, of course, scope tags is a little bit tricky to probably design and go implement and then think like, okay, how do I want this all to work together and stuff? But once you get it right, it's nice. The other thing is in the settings landscape, there's 11,000 settings, but we're sort of adding two buckets of settings. We're saying, okay, here's a new feature in Windows, here's the new settings. Those keep on top of. There's a whole other bunch of settings that are basically to help people move off from GPO. Okay. And if you don't have that already, you can kind of, like, I wouldn't recommend going back and implementing a whole bunch of like domain member settings in your MDM environment just because we made them available. So think about like, you know, which settings are for the new Windows 11 features and stuff like that, instead of sort of the monstrous task of running through the catalog and trying to select your state for every possible. Yeah, exactly. More settings is not better.
Absolutely. I know that there was either some blog posts that yourself put out or it was at a previous conference that whole changing landscape of the whole device restrictions right through to the settings catalog and that evolution of the journey of the whole policy based for Intune. Is there something that's already out there or am I just completely misremembering that?
Yeah, so we we built a whole new settings platform behind the scenes, and obviously for the standard IT admin who isn't like the type of person who's going to MMS and reading up every day and stuff like that, because there are IT admins like that where, you know, they're the IT admin for a 350 person shop and they kind of have their stuff laid out in front of them that they need to go do, and you know they'll happen to use the product in a certain way, or maybe they're using our SMB offering and stuff like that. But we try and make it as sort of like seamless as possible. But at an event like this, and for the people who are consuming this type of content, you should know that we've built a new settings platform, and then we said, you know what, this thing's awesome. We're going to open up settings catalog so you can see all of it, and then we're going to replumb everything off the same backend. So we just in April replumbed. Or in March, replumbed the endpoint security settings, or endpoint security profiles. We have a few more to do there, and then we'll go back and do baselines, and then we'll go back and do things like device restrictions, and things that don't make sense anymore when we do have a world with a catalog, like the administrative template, the device restrictions, stuff like that. We have research where basically supports, you know, those don't really need to be there anymore once we get rid of those. So, yeah.
That's the thing. So that whole thing of just basically becoming a policy is really exciting for me because it just simplifies it. Especially
you
if you're doing
graph endpoint,
especially if you're doing automation and stuff.
It's so much easier.
Yeah, you want to do your own tooling across it. You just want to make normal routine tasks the same. You've got a policy to go deal with then.
Imagine how much easier it is to troubleshoot and maintain and debug.
Absolutely.
And fix.
Some very welcome changes in that space, especially.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're on the last day of MMS.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we're now going to be starting to head away from the event and go back to normal lives, whatever world that is. Is there anything that you're looking forward to for decompression at this weekend, or is it going to be straight back into more planning and tech work?
Today is Cinco de Mayo, which is a Mexican holiday. I'm from Chicago. Chicago has quite a large Mexican population. I love the culture. I'll probably celebrate with my wife tomorrow. We'll hang out. And this weekend, maybe catch the new Doctor Strange. We'll see. But definitely disconnect.
Forgot that.
Definitely. That's out today. Today being tomorrow, the 6th.
Yeah. I was hoping to catch it while I was here on my last day because it's out in the UK today.
Yeah.
So I've had to get people to promise not to go see it without me. You're not seeing it first.
But yeah, my decompression, I play video games, love video games. It's become less of a stigma over time. Love playing video games. Saw the new Nick Cage movie last night. If you haven't seen it, don't watch the trailer.
No.
Go straight into the movie. It's so
I
good.
was quite unsure of your sarcasm level on your tweet. Was that
No, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I mean, it's
he's
silly.
actually done a decent film.
It's Nick Cage. Like, I sat next to Matt Call. We giggled the entire time. Like it's it's so funny. And going in, there's so many spoilers in the trailer. I watched a spoiler of the trailer last night. I was like, I can't believe this. Yeah, movies are great, especially now that you can go back in person.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be, spy thrillers and stuff like that, where you're thinking the whole time. If you can just disconnect and do something like that, it's great. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate it's very, very valuable, your time. And there's 1,000,001 other people that want to call you for all sorts of questions, and probably a lot deeper than I've gone into in this. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and
totally.
Enjoy the rest of the day.
I absolutely will. We have our endpoint security session today, and then Q&A. This is my first MMS, so this was a blast. Yeah. I didn't know what to expect, and it blew my small expectations out of the water. This is a great week, so
awesome,
and a lot of feedback to go report back when we get back home. So
it's an altogether different conference event, isn't it?
Totally, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Be sure to look out for the bonus session from MMS I did with David Segura, Don O'Ryan and Mike Marable, where I managed to tear them away from camp duties to talk to me, and much more coming in general from the Tech/Live channel. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit like and drop a comment if you want to see more of this type of content.